Welcome back, everyone, to episode 3 of the Sko Buffs SportsCast. We're back for another week. A little bit quieter, but we've got our women's basketball beat writer, Xavier Michnewicz, alongside me, Leo Rivera. And how you doing, Xavier?
I'm doing great. Excited to talk some hoops.
Yeah, we're gonna be hoop heavy today. The women have been competing very hard lately. They're 4-4 in Big 12 play. They're trying to find a spot in the NCAA tournament, getting back to March Madness after last year. They just missed out. But Xavier, they just came off a big win against Oklahoma State, but overall it's been tough for them to find an identity. And you mentioned that last night in our episode of Scobo Sports Basketball Live with Shane, Aditya, and overall, though, in your opinion, what has made their identity so difficult to find?
Just the lack of offensive consistency has been really hard for them to get going offensively. They're a good defensive team, but on offense, they'll just throw up mid ranges, throw up layups and entry pass. Nope, back out. No entry pass, back out. And it's honestly, it's hard to watch, right? Because they're just a really bad offensive team where they have the players and the talent to be a great offensive team. I think it's just the scheme and the motion offense just doesn't work in this era of basketball anymore.
Yeah, they're tied for, I believe, 14th in the Big 12 in points per game out of 16 teams. That's not good at all. They're a great defensive team, and they hang their hat on that. They picked up a big win against Oklahoma State, and you weren't there, but as you've kept up with it, what impressed you most about that game?
Jay Masagayo scoring 22 points is crucial for the Buffaloes. She's struggled this season. She had some injury issues. She had a knee brace on. And honestly, that knee brace hindered her a little bit. But seeing her kind of get into a groove and score 22 points against a team that they lost to in Stillwater and just flat out got out hustled in Oklahoma. I think that's a humongous win for them in terms of Masagayo getting 22 points.
I agree. I mean, she's been a little bit inconsistent all year. We thought coming in that she was going to be the centerpiece of this team. They needed her to have these type of games all the time, not just in at home. But again, you get it once and maybe it gets it a second time and just gets her rolling for the rest of the year. Though besides her, while she's had a great performance the other day, who have been some of your favorite players to watch this season? Because I know maybe not all of our listeners know everything there is to know about the team, but who can someone that is just starting to watch look out for on a regular basis?
Rhode Island transfer, Anael Dutah, is honestly, in my years of watching Colorado women's basketball, one of the biggest hustle players I've ever seen. She snags that I think 5 offensive rebounds a game. She almost averages double double. She averages not like 9 rebounds and 8 points, but she's had a few double doubles this season. And she's just super consistent. She gets to the rack, she cuts, she shoots almost 60%. Uh, she's JR's most reliable player. That's who I would look out for sure.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And it sort of reminds me of I'm kind of the elder statesman of the show, but back in my freshman year, Tiana Jones was on a much better team with better teammates like Jalen Sherrod and Frida Foreman and Quay Miller, but she was just long, athletic, and could play defense like nobody else, and was able to shut down um, opposing offensive players, but Dutat adds the wrinkle of she's one of the best rebounders in the Big 12. She's up to, I think, 8.7 a game. I have to double check that, 8.6. And that's, right there in the top three of the Big 12. I mean, you have that type of player. You can rely on her every single night. Like you said, she's been consistent. And while she's not a super energetic or talented offensive player in terms of scoring the basketball, she's still able to get points off of those offensive rebounds a lot. She brings it on both ends all the time. And I know you love Desiree Wooten. I know you're still gunning real hard to talk about Desiree Wooten in some sort of article. But what has made her so intriguing of a player for you from the very start?
So she just is a complete underdog. She tore her ACL twice. She had powerful offers out of high school and then had to settle for North Texas. And she is just a hustle player. She's a complete JR Payne player. She can play defense really well. She's kind of a shot chucker sometimes, right? But when she does shot chuck and she does hit those pull up threes, the CU Event Center just ignites. And like I've never seen it before. Even when Frida Foreman would hit a 3 pointer, she's a fun player to watch. She's shifty. Like when she untucks her jersey, she reminds me of like Kyrie Irving sometimes with the handles that she has and the way she's able to get to the rack. But she's a fun player to watch, and I'm excited that the Buffs have her for hopefully a couple more years.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to her, and she's been the leading scorer of the team this season, just 12 points a game, but they have a lot of balance, and hopefully they can get her more involved, get her more. I mean, she's just been balling lately, had 15, then 15 the last two games, and then 24 in Colorado's biggest win of the year over Iowa State.
Yeah, those are some very good points there. I think starting to look on a bigger scheme though, Xavier, looking towards March Madness. First four out right now. What do you think Colorado needs to do to get some more consistency and maybe make a push towards there?
They need to win on the road, flat out. I mean, they lost to UCF, which is the worst team in the Big 12, and they flat out those games like that are gonna miss them the postseason, and especially against teams that are worse than them on the road too. That those ones are hard to swallow. I mean, just looking at the Oklahoma State game, they got out hustled late. They they allowed Oklahoma State to go on a 10-0 run in the fourth quarter when they only had a minute and a half to overcome a 4 point deficit, which isn't a big deficit to overcome, right? But they allowed Staley Hurd to have 25 points, if I'm not mistaken. And then they come home and beat the same team they beat the same team and they're leading by 19 at one point. When like, what's the difference between those home games and those road games, right? I know the CU Event Center is a big advantage, right? But at what point is it just a morale issue or a coaching thing or a mentality thing? You got to get those road wins because you want to be able to compete in March. And I know that's a big goal for this team.
I mean, certainly is there, and you kind of talk about it. You covered this team last year as well, Xavier. It's kind of been the theme over the last couple of years, struggling on the road. I guess, other you kind of mentioned maybe coaching or morale. Is there anything else you're noticing that's kind of been the big difference in these games?
Just the lack of finishing, right? I mean, they will be up in the fourth quarter and then they just can't close out games. You talk about they played number 22 Louisville earlier this year, and they just went on a drought where they turned the ball over, were missing layups, leaving layups short, missing mid ranges, and they just lost that game. And if they win that game, you're talking about a quad one win. Louisville is ranked as a number 17 in the nation right now. Like those wins are wins that are necessary to get you over the hump for the postseason. And you just can't lose in the fourth quarter. You can't be leading the entire game and then let your foot off the gas pedal. That's just not going to work anymore. I mean, it just can't work.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, they often go into games with a plan. They play a very set, reliant offense. And then if that plan isn't working the entire game, sometimes they just don't know really what to do at that point. They don't have a set go-to player in the fourth. They don't have a closer that can get them, ahead in those games and then keep them at the very end. I think for Colorado to find itself in not just March Madness, but a viable team in the Big 12, they need that go-to player when times get tough. You'd imagine it's Wooten just because of her scoring ability and her ability to create both at the three-point line, in mid-range, towards the basket. But that often doesn't happen. They often struggle against even physicality, which has been kind of that's their forte over the past few years, is being a physical hustle team. But in some of these late game situations, they really struggle against the more physical team and look like they're just outmatched from a mental standpoint, not only physical, but they're just boxed out and then they continue to let it unravel down the stretch. So I think That's something they need to focus on and just not letting anything get to their head. And then having a more set plan for some of these fourth quarters where they're on the road and they're like not used to being ahead on the road, I guess. So they don't really have an idea of what to do to actually win the game rather than to get ahead.
Yeah, and I have to mention that, you can't completely rely on just Desiree Wooten. She doesn't even start.
Yeah.
She's the leading bench piece on that team, right? It's hard when like Des she started beginning of the year, right? But she has a better role off the bench, and you gotta rely on those starters to get you over the hump in those fourth quarter situations, flat out. I know Dez is the hustle player, the leading scorer of this team, but eventually you got to rely on your senior and Jade Masagayo, and you got to rely on your senior and Anayo Dutat. You got to rely on those type of players to help close out some of these games.
Well, Ziana Walker's been on some of these very competitive teams, and she hasn't really come through in some of these fourth quarters, whereas sometimes she does. So it's kind of an inconsistent thing. And they, either way, it can't just be a one person show. I know they say I've said there's a go-to player for scoring, but the other teams have to find that go-to player and then play cohesively in those situations. So it can't just be on one person. Like I can't just say, oh, it's all Jade Masagayo's fault that this team has struggled in the fourth quarter. But I also can acknowledge that she needs to be more consistent and needs to be better. So it's kind of, one person has to step to the forefront, but everybody has to raise their game in those situations.
Yeah, it seems like that's kind of been a theme with a lot of these Colorado teams this athletic season. But looking on towards their next opponent in Kansas State, I guess what are your guys' kind of predictions and thoughts? And we'll let Xavier go first.
Yeah, so Kansas is a tough game because Kansas has snagged a couple good wins as of late. They beat Texas Tech, who was nationally ranked, right? I think if they keep it close against Kansas State, I don't think they're going to win necessarily. I think the road woes will continue, but if they keep it close against Kansas State, I think it will say a lot for their next game against Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse. I think they could snag a win in that game if they actually show a little bit of heart in that game against Kansas State.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at if you're just talking about Big 12 stadiums, I think their second to last Big 12 win in a Big 12 stadium was against Kansas State in March Madness 2 years ago. So they had only won all of last regular season, and this was before they were even back in the Big 12. They went into Manhattan and beat Kansas State. Obviously, way different team. Kansas State much different as well, even from last year's team when they were top 10 in the nation, came to Boulder, Buffs won there. So this time around, it's interesting. I think they should win. Just looking at K-State's recent results at home, only beating Houston, the worst team in the conference by a country mile, by 4 points. That was a tough game for them. They were down at halftime, I believe, and needed a good fourth quarter. They got enough and were able to come away with the win. But then the game before, losing to Utah, Utah hasn't exactly been world beaters. And then West Virginia, tough game. They beat Cincinnati before that. They're not an awful team, but compared to how they've been the last few years, they've really been inconsistent and haven't shown an ability. Like they're kind of in a similar spot as Colorado as can they make March Madness, but they're also a team that has struggled at home this year. So Colorado, I predict they will win and get that Big 12 road win they've long desired, but it's not gonna be easy. I think K-State has some well-built aspects of their roster. Taryn Sides has been on a tear scoring wise. They have Tess Heel. She's been great coming over from Stanford. I wanted Colorado to go after her as a transfer option. Great shooter. But I think Colorado has enough to get this win. And then you feel more confident, like you said, about Kansas. And they haven't won there in 20 years.
No, they have not. They they haven't won there since 2006, which was the year I was born.
Yeah. So it should be a very interesting game and an interesting stretch for Colorado's team these next four, I guess, because then after that they come back home. play West Virginia, ranked West Virginia, and then top 10 TCU. That should be an amazing game. I'm excited to finally be back at the event center for that. I feel like I haven't watched the team play in person in since my Hollingshed was around at this point. Um, but yeah, thank you, Xavier, for sharing all those insights. I think we're going to move forward into men's basketball now, as they're coming off a loss to UCF now on a 5 game losing streak, 2-5 in Big 12 play. They started off great, and now it's just been kind of a downward spiral. And the biggest change that they made to try to address that spiral was starting freshman guard Isaiah Johnson. And yet it still hasn't quite panned out. And this can go for either of y'all if y'all watched UCF or these last couple of games. Do you think that starting Isaiah Johnson has been ultimately the wrong call rather than the right call, even though Isaiah's been playing well?
I guess you could say yes, Harrison, because if you look at the bench production, you completely are losing out on that aspect. And I think that's what made IJ so good coming off the bench was that he was able to provide that spark when you take Barrington and Ranchik and Bangot Dak out of the game. So that's definitely an area where now Colorado is losing that kind of aspect to their team. And I really don't ever think scoring was their issue. I don't think they were losing these games because they couldn't score the basketball. It's their defense, and that's what it's been all season. And especially we talked about, last time the diminishing, appearances of Elijah Malone and how he's slowly kind of just been fading throughout the season. It's really been making it difficult for Colorado.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, Leah. I think starting IJ wasn't necessarily the right call in terms of he deserved to start. I think it's just he was so good off the bench. You got to keep him in that role. He plays with a certain tenacity that really propelled that bench unit into being one of the better bench units in the Big 12. And I think it was a mistake to put him in that starting lineup just because your bench unit has now started to struggle and you're starting to spiral now.
Yeah, I think when you looked at when they had the starting lineup as it was before Isaiah, you had two guys who just were non-factors on offense. And so adding Isaiah, and if you maybe look in the future, think of adding Alon Michele, you add two very good offensive players, but you don't have the defense that, and the team doesn't have defense either way. But you make it even worse by putting Felix Casares on the bench, who, while, he's not a slouch offensively either. So I think that they need to probably go back to putting Felix over Isaiah because you have a ton of scoring in Barrington Hargis. That's why you
Yep.
brought in Barrington Hargis, was to score. And he had 20 points, a perfect first half the other night against UCF, or I guess not other night, it's been 4 days, Saturday or 5 days. But for anyone that watched that game, what were your kind of big takeaways from that and why Colorado lost?
I think it was definitely the three ball fall on Harrison. You look at the numbers, that's what killed them, right? UCF was just be able to be so hot from scoring. But not only that, they're still just, just some unfortunate, UCF just makes really good shots. They were really hot at the event center for whatever reason, and were able to just keep that flame going against Colorado.
Yeah, I think I mean, I was kind of shadowing for Buff Vision, got a really cool opportunity to watch that game from behind the scenes, got to see all the different angles of
Oh wow.
UCF draining threes on the Buffs. It was it was pretty pathetic, honestly, to see some of the perimeter defense. I think it was 63% from three as a team for UCF. And that just cannot happen at home, especially to have that kind of defensive lethargy. But looking at it tonight, they play Iowa State, number 8 in the country, going on the road, not getting any easier for this team. But not just tonight, over the next stretch, who do each of you see as the biggest player who needs to step up and make an impact individually for this team to maybe have that snowball effect and play better as a team?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think Sebastian Ranchik needs to step up flat out. I mean, he looks like a completely different player. And I haven't watched the men's team as much because I'm a women's basketball beat writer. But when I have watched, he looks completely different than how he did last year in his freshman season. And it's hard for me to believe that he almost lost that fire in him to drive to the rack super hard because he's just taking all these like mid-range fades and pull-up jumpers that like he didn't do last year. And I Sebastian Ranchik really needs to step up for this team to get back on track.
Yeah, I wanted to hop in real quick before you go, Leo. And Oliver, our another men's basketball staple, and of course you know him from Buff Stampede, has compared him to Jason Tatum in all the negative ways. He's been very inefficient this year, just 40% from the field, 33% from three. But Leo, who do you think needs to step up?
I mean, no, I think you guys hit the nail right on the head with that one. But we can go his running mate. We can go Bangot Dak, I think is another one, especially with Elijah Malone, who's been struggling. Dak's gonna be the next biggest guy who's supposed to be out there as an enforcer on defense. He's got the ability to block shots, but can he consistently at a night basis get in and be more physical and then just, fix his offense as well on the other side? It seems like when he's got lower guys that he should be dominant over, he struggles to go against them. And I think Oliver mentioned this as well, Harrison, talking about this, he's got a high center of gravity. And when don't have that really good balance inside, it makes it hard to, get good, comfortable shots. But that's definitely, two players who Colorado has to rely on because they're experienced, they're the tenured, they're the vets who have been here and know the system.
Yeah, for me personally, the easy answer, going off, if we're just going off someone who just generally needs to step up, it's Elijah Malone. The experiment has failed. I think at this point we can definitively say. But if I'm going to look outside of that, because I'm just going to leave him alone for a little bit. I've tarnished him enough some of these last couple episodes. I'm looking at IJ and Barrington just be viable on defense. They're obviously high usage offensive players. It's going to be tough for them, and maybe putting them on the floor together could, in the long run, work out and making allowing one to rest on certain possessions and then get some good defense out of them. But if they can just be okay defensively, if they can just try hard and be able to limit opposing backcourts, because you saw UCF, their backcourt combined for over 40 points. It wasn't a ton of the front court. It wasn't like they were dominating the paint. It was just that they couldn't guard the perimeter. And so when that happens, you need your guards to step up, not just the ones that you brought on for defense, like Felix Casares. I think Jalen Holland could get some more minutes in the future. He had a very nice game against UCF. I thought he could have played more. He's a good defensive player. But Isaiah and Barrington, I think, need to really step up on defense for this team to improve. So yeah, that's anything else y'all wanted to add on the team and maybe any prediction for Iowa State tonight?
Well, for Iowa State, hopefully they can keep it close so that they come back to the CU Event Center and hopefully beat TCU the next game.
That's a good point. I think Xavier's pretty optimistic. I think this one's gonna be hard. Harrison, you're going on probably, one of the toughest road environments in all of college basketball. This place is gonna be rocking, and I don't see Colorado coming out with a dub. But to your point, Xavier, they do just want to have some momentum and at least some confidence to come back and try to find a dub against TCU. That's gonna be another tough team.
Yeah, Iowa State, not just in general, but in Big 12 play, they've beaten teams at home by 20 points per game. I think the line is like 17 and a half. Colorado is not expected to keep up, but if they can, I think either way, if that as long as they don't get absolutely lampooned and demoralized, they can come back and beat TCU. I think that's a winnable game, especially at home. But like UCF, I thought was winnable as well. So they need to just find a win somewhere and then get kind of their heads in better places because this was a season that started off really hot. We thought that this was going to be a complete turnaround, that they were going to be a nice, maybe even middle of the pack Big 12 team that was on its way up, but right now just not in a good place. But shifting into football, the big sport, not a ton going on, but some developments in recent days. The biggest one last night, we found out Ezra Christensen, who the week prior, Brian Howell reported that he would not be joining the team due to an eligibility dispute, will indeed be signing with Colorado. The team made the post last night. So, Leo, I know you love this addition from New Mexico State. What does this mean for Colorado's defense?
Well, first of all, you're talking about a player who's going to be in his sixth year of college football, Harrison. So just that experience alone is going to be huge. The production value that he brings, the provenness that he can get after your quarterback It's something Colorado's interior defensive line completely lacked. I mean, this was probably I mean, I wouldn't say it was. It was the worst unit of the team last year. Colorado's biggest weakness was defensive line. So now you go out and get a, Conference USA player who is like the best at his position. It's going to be absolutely game changing. And you talk about Santana Hopper, another guy coming in who has production as well. Those two together, oh my goodness, they're going to provide pressure from the interior. Should help stop the run. I know that's not those guys' forte, but just being able to be big bodies and disruptive in the middle is going to clear lanes for your linebackers. And to go from a week ago where you're like, well, we just lost the best, one of our best defensive players in the portal to now he is signed and ready to go. It's a crazy change for Colorado football.
Yeah, Leo, I agree 100%. I think this completely just rebolsters your defensive line and the outlook you have for your defensive line this offseason because they added a lot of good players, but Ezra Christensen was the big one they added. And it's a huge pickup for them to get him back almost as he was almost lost, right? I mean, he was almost like, oh, we just lost this interior menace, and now the Buffs are getting him back. It's humongous.
Yeah, and him and Hopper were both first team all conference last year, and Hopper was all conference with Appalachian State in the Sun Belt. Like these are accomplished dudes the Buffs have added, and I think that's super important. Any way you slice it, Christensen was a dog, as Deion Sanders looks for. He led the nation in quarterback hurries. He had 40 pressures. And while, yeah, it's New Mexico State, if you can plug a gap, you can plug a gap. And that's what Ezra
100%.
Christensen did last year, breakout campaign.
And I think that's one of the things you've seen too we've talked about this Colorado offseason. They've gone after players who have proven themselves, that shown they can play the sport. And when you talk about Ezra Christensen, he's just look, I mean, look at the guy. He just monstrously built. He looks like he's coming to get after your quarterback. And if you're an offensive lineman, that's a guy you don't want to line up against, regardless of what level of football he was playing at. I'm very excited to see what he can do in the strength program of Colorado with Coach Swayze and be a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, and I think that's just been the underlying theme of the transfer portal in general was adding people with actual experience and actual with an actual resume. Because last year they were recruiting a lot on potential
Yep.
and a lot on what can this player become. Now I think Ezra Christensen is just like the poster child for being able recruiting with a resume.
That's a great way to put it. Recruiting with a resume. I love that, Xavier, because that's exactly what Indiana and Kurt Signetti did this past year. I mean, they talked about it. That was the, path that got them to a national title and going undefeated. And I think if your teams, you're looking at that and you have to copy.
Have to agree with both of you. Put it really nicely. I know they have talked a lot about how Dion is like copying the Signetti model. I'm not really sure if that is all going to work for everybody, but I definitely love how CU has gone about themselves in the portal today, or this cycle. But staying on defense and actually staying on coaching, this is some news maybe none of either of y'all don't know about because it's just coming out. But there's a report that Robert Livingston is interviewing for the Dallas Cowboys defensive coordinator position. And last offseason, he interviewed for the Saints defensive coordinator position, my team. But just instant reactions to that, and is CU if CU loses Robert Livingston, how does that affect things?
I think it sucks if you lose Robert Livingston because I know that as much of a down year the defense had last year, I still am very confident in Rob Livingston as a coach and his scheme and what he's able to bring out of his players. I think especially when you talk about the offseason you had and bringing in so many of these guys, you need that mastermind to figure it out. He is also a younger coach, but I think the interview is just a process, right? As a coach, you want to go out, you want to get that experience, you want to figure out, how does my resume compare to other candidates trying to get this job? And it's just experience. I don't think it's too much to look at. I think a lot of coaches go out and interview, especially in the NFL as well. If you look at that, so many coaches go out and take interviews. It doesn't mean they're leaving. It's just good practice. And if you want to move up in the world, you definitely should be taking those and making those connections.
Yeah, Leo, I completely agree. I mean, it would absolutely suck if you lose Livingston, right? I mean, defense did have a down year, right? But hopefully it like if they were to lose Livingston when that spring portal opens, hopefully you don't see some of these players you just added this offseason leave because the coach that recruited them is gone.
Definitely.
So, I mean, yeah, I imagine Dion probably he has a good relationship with the Cowboys. I imagine maybe gave Jerry Jones a reference or, Stephen Jones, the Jones family, some good put in the good word for Livingston for both of these interviews. And I think last season you look at how Livingston conducted his coaching job, I don't think you can really blame him. The talent was an issue. The talent was definitely an issue. While some of the position coaches you could definitely look at and be okay, this position is particularly underperforming. Maybe it's not someone that works particularly close with Livingston, like a linebacker or interior D line, that you still saw the scheme that brought this team to 9-3 and 9-4 last season or the year before. Um, Reveal itself at different times with and along with Colorado's season. So I think Livingston would be a big loss if he were to go to the NFL. And I think, you look at these past two off seasons, he's getting the interviews. I think you could say his days are numbered and that this guy is impressed enough to where he's going to get an NFL coaching job, going to be back in the league after he was with the Bengals, then came to CU and be back in the NFL one day very soon.
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of if, I think it's a matter of when for sure, Harrison, but you're hoping to get one more year out of him at least.
Yes, definitely. So just looking at everything else, I'm not really sure in terms of football if there's really a ton more going on. We'll obviously have some more in the spring, and we might have a very, very special guest from that football team next week in our podcast. So stay tuned for more info on that.
Yes, sir.
So, Xavier, thank you for joining us this week. A very special guest as well, coming on talking some women's hoops. We got to talk some football. Hope you all enjoyed episode 3 of the Sko Buffs SportsCast, and we will see y'all later.